where the shepherds were the first called, as we've heard in the Gospel. Why were they the first called? Because as we know, the Son of God wasn't welcomed by his own. No one had time for God's way because people want to do it their way. We're probably familiar with the parable of the great king who throws a great party. And therefore, he tells his servants, now go and tell the guests that are on the list to come, because everything's been made ready. Everything's been prepared. But then, one by one, excuses. Oh, well, tell him I can't make it because I'm getting married in a couple of months and I'm busy organising stuff, so, you know, I've got other things to do. And another, well, listen, I've just bought a block of land and therefore I have to tend to that, and that's more important to me than a party, so thank you, I'll pass. And then another one, and another one, and another one. All sorts of excuses. So then they came back to the king and said, well, look, all the people, all the guests that you had previously invited have declined the RSVP you sent them, the invitation you sent them. And they were all his people. Nobility, the status quo in society, people in high places. But then what does the king say? Okay, they're not going to come. That's their problem. I want you to go out into the most poorest areas of the city and tell those folk the king has made a great supper for you. Please come along as you are. The shepherds, they were common people. They were the lowest class. And of course, as we know, they would tend the lands and they would tend to the agricultural functions and, of course, the livestock and so forth. And their owners never really had a word with them because there'd always be word of mouth via servants and so forth to convey messages. Because basically with those sorts of people, they are the working class, and that is that, and we don't have anything to do with them. And yet, David of old was a humble shepherd boy, who the Lord came unto him and said, listen, your heart is in line with mine. I want to raise you up. I want to call you to my service. And he became king. Likewise, Jesus came in our midst. Yes, he is King of Kings, but he came as the shepherd, the one who tends to those who don't have a voice, the one who tends to those people who don't have a place in society, the one who listens to those who don't really have any such status in the world. And he beckoned them onto him because he is their strength. He is their voice, especially to the people who perhaps have done well in society but have fallen. You raises them up on wings of prayer. Don't be afraid, I am your strength. I am your source. I have been born for you and for all who have lost dignity. St. Gregory of Palabas, writing long ago in his 58th homily upon this night, says, heaven and earth are made equal because the birth of the Son of God has restored dignity unto that which was lost on the earth, and has made it, via his birth in the flesh in the manger, equal as the citizens of heaven, so those on earth may proclaim the goodness and glory of God. So the shepherds were the first called, as we hear in the Gospel of St. Luke. But in the Gospel of Matthew, it's a very different story. We're probably familiar with the carol, "We three kings of Orient are, bearing gifts we've travelled afar. Field and fountain, moor and mountain, following yonder star, the Star of Bethlehem." Kings, gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The Star of Bethlehem, that which shone in the sky to present something great is happening in the world. Now, they weren't kings, although kings sent them on their behalf. But as the Greek word mago, and even in the Italian, mago, unfortunately in English it's been translated incorrectly. It doesn't mean a magician, but it means those people who have wisdom beyond understanding. Those people who perhaps even have a gift of clairvoyancy. Those people who can read the signs of the time. And it is extraordinary that God uses the natural to convey his message. And different things mean different things to different people. The Star of Bethlehem, what was it? For the ancient Chinese, it was a comet. Halley's Comet. As we see, for those of us who admire art, the famous painting of Giotto, his Nativity, we see the comet over the stadium. For the ancient American Indians, it was the Aurora Borealis, the festival of lights, as it were, and the glory of God shone around. But for the Magi, the sages, those who read the heavens, it was the conjunction of planets. The Magi, who were they? They were the wise in the land of Chaldea, or modern-day Iraq. And they read the signs. And the first conjunction was of the planet Jupiter and Saturn. Enough to make headlines, as it were. Then there was a second conjunction, Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus. And the last conjunction was Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, and Mars. And it all happened in the constellation of Pisces. For as we know, Jesus was born on the 25th of March. The reason why the Church either put it in December or January was to annihilate the pagan festivals, as it were. The church year starts off with the birth of the King and ends with the awaiting of his return in Advent. But why did the Magi make sense of not only the great signs in the sky, but come to the understanding of a king, a priestly king, born in the land of the Jews? Perhaps some of you are familiar with the story from the Old Testament of Daniel and the lion's den. Therefore, when the nation of Israel was sacked, they went into slavery, into Babylonia. And of course, they ransacked everything. The Temple of God, the Ark of the Covenant, the artifacts, and so forth. And in their slavery, as we probably familiar with that song, by the rivers of Babylon, we hung up our harps, we sat and we wept. How could we sing of the Lord on alien soil? And therefore, King Nebuchadnezzar noticed that amongst the Jews there was a child who had the gift of wisdom, who had the gift of prophecy. His name was Daniel. And therefore the king would invite him to interpret signs, dreams, and wonders. But when Nebuchadnezzar profaned the sacred goblets of the temple, instead of them being used for the worship of God, he used them at dinner parties. And suddenly the finger of God's right hand wrote on the wall, your kingdom shall fall. They didn't know that. Only Daniel could interpret that. And therefore the kingdom was overridden by the Persian king Darius. And Darius took a liking to Daniel. But as we know, jealousy is a vicious mistress. And therefore, when there were the people in Babylonia, there came out an edict that you cannot worship the Lord God, but you must bow down to pagan deities. Well, Daniel couldn't do that. Daniel followed every bit of the law of the land, but he could not succumb to blasphemy. And Darius's men got in his ear, telling all derogatory things about Daniel, untruths, and of course had him thrown in the lion's den. And therefore, what happened? The morning after, when they opened the den, Daniel was asleep with the lions as they were kittens. The angel of the Lord was with him. And that's what made Darius open his eyes and come to the realization that the God of Yahuwah of Israel is the living God. As we hear, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. You shall love him with all your mind, heart, and strength, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And therefore Darius lifted Daniel in his kingdom and put him in charge of the wise, of the sages, and so forth, because of his gift of prophecy and his devotion to the living God. And therefore, the Magi knew well about the prophecies of the Messiah, who would come into the world and be born in Bethlehem. But as we know, these conjunctions, or the star in the heavens, appeared 2 years later. It's not as we think. The shepherds come, the angels sing glory, and there the wise men follow after with the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. No. Because God enters into the silence of the world. God doesn't reveal himself to anyone and everyone, but first to a select few. Why? Because just like his ministry, when he was 30 years old, if it had happened before, he would have been crucified much earlier. And as we know, people were troubled when they saw these conjunctions in the sky. And when the wise men, as we know, Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar, went to the first call, which was Herod the Great, the king of Judea, as etiquette, and inquired, "Where's the new baby king? We've come to worship him." When Herod heard this, he fell to the ground. He was threatened. What's going on? I am king. What is all this? And as the Gospel says, Herod was troubled and all of Jerusalem with him. And then he inquired amongst his own people, the priests, magicians, and so forth, what's this prophecy? Where is this supposed Messiah? And of course, the scriptures foretold, he shall be born in Bethlehem, as we've heard in the hours. You are Bethlehem, although you may think you are the least amongst the cities of God, but in your very heart, Emmanuel shall be born and come to his people. And then, as we know, we are familiar with what happened at the Last Supper. And Satan, evil personified, entered into Judas to betray the Lord. In my Good Friday homily, I reminded you that the unholy cannot utter the name of God, which is Jesus Christos, Jesus Christ. They get us to do it instead. And we hear it on the streets, television, films, everyone blaspheming the name of Jesus Christ. So therefore, they enraged Herod, putting all sorts of things in his mind. Of course, he was a proud man, but all sorts of things were stewing in his mind. Who's this person? He's come to threaten my kingship. What will people say about me? What legacy will I leave? I must destroy him. And cunningly, he said to the wise men, "Tell me exactly where he is after you go see him, so that later I too may worship him." And of course, as we know, that doesn't happen. The wise men arrive months later to worship the king. Why months later? Why in the silence? Why did not God reveal himself there and then? Because as we read in the Gospel of Luke, 40 days after his birth, Mariam and Joseph take Jesus to the temple for the rites of purification, to present him unto the Lord, the rites of circumcision. therefore, as we know, when the wise men come unto the Lord, they bow down and worship, because they who worship the stars came to adore him, as the prophecies foretold, who is the Orient from on high. And the angel of the Lord tells them, reveals or unmasks Herod's plan. Don't return to Herod, because he plans to kill the young child, but depart back into the regions of Chaldea via another route, which we will show. And so they did. When Herod saw this, that they did not return, he was enraged. He was furious. Because as we know, when the wise men came to Jesus, he was a toddler. He was a 2-year-old. And therefore, the angel said unto Joseph, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and stay there until we tell you to return. And of course, we had the bloodbath of the Holy Innocents. And we're talking about at least 3,000 baby boys slaughtered, beheaded, all because of the threat of the Messiah. And therefore, the Lord comes in our midst once again this evening, not to threaten us. Because as we know, when the Lord reveals himself, people who may not be religious or may not have faith, they get paranoid. How can this happen? But for us who believe in his holy name, we know, we feel, we can be reassured that he comes in our midst to be born in our hearts and to promise us, when the going gets tough, call upon my name and I will come unto you. Tonight is about intervention. When it gets hard, intervene. We've been faced with the crisis of bushfires. Many people lost their homes. Many people died, especially our emergency services. Many animals. And of course, our hearts go out to them, and so do our prayers. But when we are confronted with our own mortality, sometimes we fail to call upon God, intervene. But we either cry in shame or we refuse his mercy and, like Simon Peter, get away from him. So tonight is about the love and mercy of God breaking hearts of stone so that he may render those hearts for love alone. The baby boy who is born in Bethlehem comes once again in our midst to make us whole and to give us that encouragement not to be afraid, regardless of who we are or what we aren't. If anything, the birth of this baby boy challenges us not to be more than what we are, but to be who we are, and nothing more and nothing less. To come unto him who is the shepherd of souls, who is that star that glows in the night sky, to remind us that he is the wonderful Counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father and Prince of Peace. We're experiencing the uncertainty of perhaps another world war with everything that's going on in the world. Therefore, tonight is a call to his promise that even 1,000 may fall beside you, 10,000 at your right, yet nothing will approach you, for he will overshadow you with the shadow of his wings. And therefore we trust in the Lord. Come as one of us, so that we may be raised to new heights and never fear come what may, because he has been born in our hearts. He has been born for all people, and therefore he came to make us whole and rise us up on wings of prayer. May the Lord born in Bethlehem shine in your hearts, and may the Lord always hold you in the palm of his hand. And the Father, Son, Holy Spirit